series, we will talk about the animal kingdom, and I hope we will try to understand the basics of how we classify animals, the features that we take into account, and what these features mean. So let's begin. The part one is all about understanding the overview of the body plans. So whenever we start to understand about an animal, we can think that whether this animal is made up of only certain type of cells, and these cells are not forming any particular kind of tissues, but they are still present together, performing their own individual tasks. In that way, acting as a primitive multicellular kind of structure. Or else we can, on the other hand, see cells coming actually together to work with each other, dividing their work so that one particular type of cells work together to perform certain tasks, another set of cells work together to perform another task, what is called as the division of labor, such as that we see in the case of a muscular tissue, nervous tissue, connective tissue, and epithelial tissues in the case of animals. Then, when these tissues further come together to form organs, they further become organ systems, they bring about even more intricacies. For example, let's talk about the stomach. Stomach as such has epithelial tissues for the enzymes, the hormones, and the other chemicals like HCl and mucus that it produces. Simultaneously, it also has muscles to crush it from all the sides so that it can mix the food very evenly. Simultaneously, it also has another thing, the nerves which senses the environment that is there and also giving the muscles the signal when it has to contract or relax and to ensure that the food mixes evenly. Then lastly, it also has connective tissue, which absorbs whatever materials in small amount that the stomach absorbs, because majority of absorption does not occur in the stomach, it occurs in the small intestine. And simultaneously, it also brings the information in the form of hormones and other aspects. But in totality, these tissues work together, right? And they literally act as an organ. So these are various aspects that we see in animals also when we classify them. Certain animals have only cellular level organization, some have tissues, and while others have organs. Now, as we already mentioned, that these organisms or these structures can then form into larger bodies, and these bodies might just be cell aggregates or they might be blind sac. Blind sac basically means it's just an empty cavity surrounded by a outer wall. So that is what is present there. There is no hollow space between that outer wall and that cavity that is present within it, and that cavity itself forms the opening for the mouth and the anus. Then the next aspect is that of your tube within tube plan, wherein one tube here refers to your body wall, and then the outer, that is the outer wall, and then subsequently the inner wall, that is your digestive system, or the alimentary canal per se, acts as your human beings also, where the outer tube is your skin, and then the inner tube, that is your human alimentary canal. The alimentary canal starts from your anus and ends all the way into your, oops, I said it wrong. It starts from your mouth and then all the way it goes all the way to your anus. But that slip of tongue was intentional because, as I will talk about tube in tube plan, we will understand that there are two ways in which the tube formation can occur in animals, whether the mouth emerges first or whether the anus emerges first. So that way, your deuterostomes and protostomes are understood, and that we will discuss in the subsequent sessions. Next aspect is symmetry. Let's take any body and try to imagine in whatever planes that they can be divided. Or you might have done that activity in class, where in mathematics class or geometry class in per se, where or paint on a paper and crush it between those pages, and then you see a beautiful pattern emerging out. Obviously, you get a bilateral kind of symmetry I've seen on the extreme right, where you get two equal halves when you are dividing it from the central portion. On the other hand, say for example, you see a star, a typical star that you draw whenever you have to draw a sky. So that five-pointed star, when you see, you can cut it in various halves, and these various halves can emerge from any particular plane. So there is more than one plane of division there. Such kind of division, symmetry is called as a radial symmetry. And radial symmetry further can be of just radial type, wherein you have more than two kind of planes of division, and you can also have biradial symmetry, wherein you have two planes of division. Lastly, we also have organisms which are asymmetric in nature, such as the case of sponges, which do not have any particular kind of shape, although there are certain sponges also which do acquire certain kind of symmetry, but still more or less they are asymmetric in nature. Now, there are also examples of animals, even other than sponges also, which may show asymmetric uh, kind of nature or kind of appearance, and you can try to find out about them. Similarly, I also wanted to leave on a point to understand what is the meaning of the terms biradial and bilateral. What are the differences between these two terms? Because you can see that there are certain differences, but try to expand this definition. How just the same prefix, the bi word referring to two, is connected with radial and lateral, and how this word has emerged out. Next is the body planes. Whenever we talk about any human body, now we're getting into more intricacies when we talk about individual parts and how they are located, where they are located, in what context they are located, what are other things present around them. And when we have to discuss about these tissues, organs, and anatomical features of any animal, we have to go into depth of where and how they are present. For that, we need to first understand the plane at which we are talking about. That plane is the XYZ kind of plane that we can see. That is when we are dividing the body in such a manner that it is coming into two lateral halves or two left and right halves, or we are dividing a body in such a manner that it's creating a front and the back half, that is the frontal section, and then the third kind of section, that is when you're dividing it from the center in a manner through the most smallest axis, and that is called as your transverse or a horizontal or a cross section. So if you will see that if this is the entire length of the person, then this is the width of the person, and comparatively the width is shorter than your length. So that is where I use the word the major or the longer axis and the shorter axis. Okay, so the first plane that is shown here is that of the sagittal or the median plane, as also seen here in the female reproductive system diagram, where you can see all the parts, that is the urinary bladder, the uterus, and the rectum and anus of the digestive system also visible. So that is a sagittal section through the mid part. And since it is from the middle part of the body, it is called as the median part. However, you can have sections from this half, you can have sections from this half, you can have sections from this half also, which are more edges rather than present in the central aspect. But these edges central are also termed, as we will discuss in the next slide. Then in this case also, you can cut it from more closely towards the body or more far away from the body as well. Similarly, you can also cut an organism at any scale. And do try to imagine how the structure might look like. Maybe you can pick up any one part of your body or any object around you and try to imagine how you will see it when you will cut it from different axes. Maybe you can just see a flower and imagine when you cut it from the top of the petal, how does it look like? When you cut it more closer to the bottom region of the flower, that is where your pedicels and other aspects are present, how does that look like? And how does it look like when you cut it from the middle portion? So try to see how different structures look. Or even if you don't want to just go for a flower, go for a lemon also. You can see different aspect when you cut a lemon at different angles also, or any other fruit for that matter. Okay, so as you can see in these organs also, that are the thoracic cavity or your chest cavity, as well as the transverse section as shown in the case of your human brain. Now, we have to talk about organs. We have to mention in what context they are present, where they are located exactly, and we have to designate uh, like directions to them. And when we talk about directions, we have various ways to classify them, not just north, west, east, west, but also in context of other organs where these structures are present. So starting from the immediate part, the head region of an organism is called as the anterior part. The rear end is called as the posterior part. Any region which is present more in the upper part of the body is called as the superior part. Anything that is present in the lower part is called as the inferior part. Anything that is present more central to the body is medial. Anything that is present far away from the center is called as the lateral. Now, these terms are most contextual and more referral in the sense that when you talk about something as proximal, something that is proximal for one reference point may be distal for another reference point. So proximal and distal basically comes from when something is closer to the reference point is proximal, farther is distal. Similarly, superficial is something when it's present more on the surface, while deep is when it is present more deep inside the body. So do try to explain now the structure, the locations of these particular organs on your own. Say, talk about the heart, where your kidneys are located, where your brain is located, and then also maybe you can pick up any other organ as such as the urinary bladder. Try to imagine how these organs are present, and also in reference to each other, which one is proximal, which one is distal, which one is superficial, which one is deep. Think about these so that you can learn about these terms in a better manner. Last point of this discussion is body segmentation. We can divide body into segments. Sometimes these segments would be two segments, wherein each segment has its own identity and identity in the sense that structures are often repeated as well, but these structures are repeated very distinctly. And identity, I mean that they are both internally as well as externally divided. However, in the case of pseudometamerism, it basically means false metamerism, and where we see that the segmentation is only external. There is no repetition as such internally. And also what we see is that these structures are often also fallen off whenever they require, particularly as seen in the case of tapeworm, which is the causative agent of a few of your digestive ailments. And these segments that it can fall off are called as proglottids. So that I will show you in the next slide as well. And do understand and do try to explore how these segments, as we have already mentioned, chordates, arthropods are also metameric animals. How do these look like in these animals? I am going to show you the example of erythema, that is an annelid, but do try to explore how it looks like in case of arthropods and that of chordates as well. So in the case of erythema, that is your earthworm, you can see that there are not just external segments or the rings that you see from the outside, there are also internal segments present. However, when we look at the example of tapeworm, we see these proglottids, which are just present like stack of coins, and then these last stack of coin are the basically the proglottids which contain the reproductive structures, the eggs, etc., which are often laid off and which can be taken up through feces and spread the parasitic life cycle stages across to other animals as well. So now we have discussed an overview of the body plan, the body plane, the body axis, the directions, and so on and so forth. In the next slide, we will talk about the developmental stages. We will talk about other aspects in the case of development. So let's see you there. And we'll till then reflect deeper on whatever we have explored. Thank you for the session. And do like, subscribe, and follow for more.